I'm just curious what your take is on something that was governing all of our lives, including the business and the economy, ESCOM, and how it's just sort of become a non-event. And what do you think has happened?
Wonderful question. I've had the privilege of meeting Asime Nyide, the the chairman of ESCOM. Some years ago, came to our offices at Bryanston, came in for an interview. He wrote a really good book, Beating on a Darkie, I think it's called. He is a class A. So when he was appointed as chairman of ESCOM, it was when Andre de Ruyter was there. For the very first time, you had ESCOM that was engaging with its shareholder, i.e. government. He tells me up to then, the previous meeting that ESCOM had had with government was 5 years previous. And clearly, when you bring the media into the mix and you have headlines where the one says that headline writers like you to read the stories, so they might be exaggerating a tad when they put those headlines together. But if you're on the other side of the headline, it's not very nice reading. So you had this antagonism between government and ESCOM, which goes back many years, and a lack of support, he tells me. And we read that in Andre de Ruyter's book as well. It was obvious what was happening, but there was no support from the state. You know, when the state started attacking Marcus Jooste as a cohesive unit, they got that report together, which explained everything, and a day later he shot himself because the game was up. It's a very similar thing to ESCOM. Now you have the whole might of the state, which is moving in the same direction with ESCOM. Mteta's going to be he'll be with us on the 12th of September, so you can say it all in his own words. But if you look at his track record, he took over from the Ventures company, Altron, at a time where it was not doing that well. And he has been one of the great wealth creators for shareholders during the 5 or so years that he ran that business. He is a guy who's run the South African offices of Microsoft. He's been well educated, but also went in the American corporate structure. He worked for a number of other multinationals in the United States. And as I say, he's a class act. So I think you've got, on the one hand, when he came in there, he said, the problem here is that we're trying to do it very much on our own. How do you get rid of the mafias that were just living on what the Guptas had pioneered if you don't have a support of the SAPS or of the state apparatus? So it's like, I remember reading so many of the comments ahead of the election, and many members of the public said, oh, just wait for the 30th of May and we're going to have load shedding again. It's going to be worse than ever. And as much as Mr. Nyide came out and said, we are spending a fraction of the diesel that we were spending before, we are getting things together. It's partly due to what Andre de Ruyter and Jan Huber also brought about, but it's also partly due to the fact that we actually getting our act together, generally speaking. And we never believed it because, oh, ye of little faith, you believed that 2024 was going to go the way that it would. No one could have called it. No one would have called 1994. ESCOM at the moment is doing what it needs to do for now. We also have a massive injection from the private sector. Don't underestimate what the 12A and what's called 12EA, Section 12 of the Income Tax Act, where if you as a private citizen invest in a solar-powered company, you will get 125% back off your income tax, reduction in income tax in year one. So actually it's a no-brainer. We've got quite a few partners who've been talking about this on BizNews, and you can go and watch the videos, Geltech, Future Years, and they explain how it is. And you can then gear up for this and actually get more than 125. You get your money back and have a really good investment into the future for many years. That was an innovation that the government brought through. It was something where the government said, damn it, we're in trouble. How are we going to fix this? We need South Africans to invest in it. And I'll leave you with this last thought. South African companies have got 1.5 trillion rand on their balance sheets in cash. It's extraordinary. There's money sitting there they have not invested. Who would have invested in the last 30 years? The money is sitting in cash. The minute that the South African corporate sector starts believing that this is for real, you'll have yet another underpin to the brighter future that South Africa has. We got Eskom. Eskom seems to be right. We'll find out more from Teja on the 12th. But the other big thing on this is that those little levers that can turn, those little dials that can be turned up, have been forgotten for so long. Oil and gas in South Africa. We've also got on the 12th, and here's the story you need to pay attention to. South Africa's gas funds. The DA's Laura McCann with us to London, to our event in London, and told the international community about this. They're still not kind of buying it. But if you read any international media, you will find that the hottest oil and gas property right now is Namibia. It's the money that's going into there in Namibia is mind-blowing. That's why Namibia are now saying to the rest of the world, they say, you have to have visas now to come to our country. I just saw that this week. They turned the tide on the rest of it. Namibia is only a couple of million people. They are going to be the next Norway. Norway is the richest country on earth. So Namibia is moving in that direction. But now I'll ask you this. Where is Namibia's gas funds? These massive gas funds. Well, if you know a little bit about our geography on the west coast of South Africa, the way that oil and gas works is it goes from a river, so the Orange River in this case, unfortunately it bends downwards instead of being straight. So as it bends downwards, that's how your boundary for your ocean is demarcated. And if you can imagine Namibia on the top and South Africa below it, Orange River comes down, it bends downwards, all of their gas fields are in this area where the rest of the world just wants a piece. So to the south of that, there's very little exploration. Why? Because South Africa's legislation has been so bad. Zuma wanted 80% for the state and only 20% if you were prepared to come and sink your gas wells or sink your wells there. With a more sensible policy, that whole geography, the geology, from the area where Namibia has its gas finds all the way down the west coast to Cape Town, which is a heck of a long way. It's got exactly the same geology and exactly the same, says Lorimer, potential. When they sink a gas well or an oil well in the world anywhere, the chances of getting something are 1 in 10. In Namibia, it's 9 in 10. Those are the realities. We've got the stuff here with the southern Cape Coast as well, and with the east coast. There is a lot of it. But at our conference of the 12th, we've got Don Zube coming. Don was one of the original entrepreneurs who brought black business into South Africa back in the early 90s. He was the very first black director of Anglo American. He started a company called Real Africa Holdings. You might recall it. It made billions of rands. And unlike the other guys who hung on to it and used the money for themselves, he said this was an empowerment vehicle. So he liquidated and gave the money to all the thousands and thousands of people who had participated there, of the black people who participated, giving a lot of them a big head start. Don is the chairman of a company called Kinetco, which again, Judge Lorimer tells me the only business that he's ever invested in. He's got shares in Kinetco. It's listed in Australia. Kinetco has got the license to exploit gas in Mpumalanga. And as good as Namibia is with its 9 out of 10, Kinetco hits 10 out of 10 when it puts down a gas well. James reckons it's the gas boom that is coming for South Africa is, he likens it to the gold boom in the Witwatersrand and the diamond boom in Kimberley. But what stopped it? Stupid legislation from a government with absolute power and absolute corruption. Yes, man. Sorry, here comes the microphone. When? Yeah.
South Africa is grey listed, right? Because of money laundering episode. How long will it take, do you think, for South Africa to get itself in order so that we need to borrow money, but the lenders will be very apprehensive, I would imagine, because of our bad listing?
Okay, so the grey listing is a very interesting scenario. We know that there's a lot of politics in it as well. FATF, which is based in Switzerland, is a multilateral. So there are lots of people that are involved in. We know that our country has been much more open to the facilitating of funding for radical groups in the Middle East. We know it from our former foreign minister and the policies that we propagated on the global stage. We also know that grey listings are a very, very serious issue, and it's been building in this country for decades. It's so interesting now, in 2015, 2016, before we decided that it was probably a good idea to be living in another country for a while. What was happening in this country was pretty frightening. If you're in the media, you knew it, and we published it continuously. We were privy to a lot of information that we didn't publish, but the basics were that the Guptas were sending money via Transnet deals in China, via given deals with anyone else in the world. They were sending money outside of this country at a horrific rate, rubber stacked along the way from friends of theirs in the Reserve Bank. So that was where we come from. As an international community, it took a heck of a long time to act on this. We know that Peter Hain did an incredible job in Britain. He is a South African, and although he's been a member of the British cabinet, and I suppose he lives in Britain, he still feels very strongly his parents were anti-apartheid activists who were forced to leave the country. That's why he left here. But he stood up in the House of Lords where no one was interested and started attacking the Guptas and started attacking more of this. So those pennies took a long time to drop. And when they dropped, the FATF, of course, got pashed, and they, as often happens in bureaucracies, took a little longer, and then they grey listed us. At the time that the Guptas were gone, that Zuma was gone, that we were starting to make progress on it. The Treasury is very transparent about the process. You can get the chapter and verse on where it is that we've still got to fix ourselves and how we are along that process. So there's a process. It took a long time for us to get on to the grey list. It won't happen that we get off automatically. I remember initially the Treasury guys were saying it should be last year. Well, it's taken longer than they thought, but we are moving in the right direction. And if you look at South Africa, even in the darkest days, there were two government institutions that were unimpeachable. And the one was the Treasury. That's why Zuma tried to take it over on the 15th of December, 2015, if you recall. Manigate and all of that. Des van Rooyen. What people forget is that Des van Rooyen walked in there with two Gupta plots next to it. They were going to do the work, i.e. make sure that the money got out the country, out of our Treasury. And the other one that I think you probably would agree with is the South African Reserve Bank. We've got the Reserve Bank and we've got the Treasury, and they have been bulwarks despite the worst. Now we can draw on that. We can also draw on the role that the civil society have made over that period. And I guess I'd go back to what Magnus said about Peter Lynch. With grey listing, we're going in the right direction. So it will take time. We just need to be maybe a little patient on that one. So,
Please hold.
Good morning, Alec. Sorry. We spoke briefly of oil and gas. Let's move forward / to mining. It seems that the Western Cape, per se, is under attack from junior miners, and with respect to all the capitalists sitting in the room, I think if we look at Betonzoek, we just Piketba, they opposed that mining application there for 19 years. Just around the corner, up over the mountain, near Napier, there's a prospecting application for gold that, as at last week, the 15th, we submitted our comments to the initial bar report. So that's in our back garden. I'd like your comment and opinion on that in the Western Cape, please.
I must say, I just love the Western Cape. It's people here take an interest. There's active citizenry. If you translate what is happening here to what happened in the Eastern Cape, there's a poor guy called John, not John Thompson. He married someone who's at school with us called Sharon Thompson. What's his name? John? Anyway, this poor guy, he's on an NGO and he's been fighting it in just south of the KZN border, and he's all in it, and there have been murders, and the Australian miners have been in there ripping the place to pieces because no one really cares. In the Western Cape, people care. And if you have active citizens like Kelly, I could hear that it's pretty close to your heart, you could stop anything. But if you have inaction, anything can happen. So I think that the junior miners, being what they are, obvious. There's another word for a Perth. Well, another word for a crook. The Aussies tell me this. It's called the Perth entrepreneur. So if you see that the company that's coming in is listed in Perth, be warned. Just don't stop. We have fantastic laws in our country. We have probably amongst the best laws in the world. Problem is, for 30 years, we didn't apply it. You have NGOs who will stand up against the worst abuses. But that's only if those in the area care. In the Western Cape, it's a different part of the country. I'm so privileged to be living here because it is so different to whatever. You can't do anything about it, so just let it go. Here, you know that you can do something about it. And you do. So I wouldn't put money on those miners getting those licenses through.
Slaps. Is the ANC going to survive the government of national unity?
Okay, my name is Nostradamus. But so far, so good. We live in a country where I think it was Jan Smuts who said it, that the worst never happens. The worst never happens, but the best never happens either. And we worry ourselves sick. Do you know what happened in the settings? I just got to those who haven't been following this. What these Blitzbokken who were once fantastic, and they become pathetic. So they go to the Olympics, they play the first game, they lose to Ireland. Play the second game, they lose to New Zealand. The third game, they've got impossible task to beat Japan by 25 points. They beat it 49-3, I think it was. Yeah. So they make it into the quarterfinals last night. Most people, come on, they're playing New Zealand. These useless Blitzbokken. What happened? They beat New Zealand. We do it. We just... So we might just have a medal. We only got 3 medals in the last Olympic Games. 3. And 2 of them came from one person. So we might just get the Blitzbokken winning us a medal. They're playing France in the cities that may or may not win, but at least they got a shot at the bronze. for a country that got 3 medals out of the last Olympics, this is quite cool. I don't know. I just believe that in 2017, a updated biography came out on Cyril Ramaphosa. And in my misguided wisdom, because he hadn't yet taken over as president, I thought, well, it would be a good idea to do an audiobook, which I've never done before, on this biography, which is thick. So I applied to the publishers and to the author, and he said, no, fine, you can do it, no problem. And it took me 3 months to do the audiobook. Unless you've done it before, just don't even try. Leave it to the professionals. I'm going to next time. Because you make a little fluff, and you've got to start again. And then you rewind, and the tech is not that good. Anyway, after spending 3 months reading Ramaphosa's biography, I think I know a little bit about this guy. And what I would sum it up with is that he loves the collective, consensus. Doesn't like fighting with people. He's got a beatific smile. Beatific, look at the guy. He smiles at you and you think, well, nothing bad can happen from someone to smile. So he's in his sweet spot. And where he is now, with support of smart people, I mean, remember the upgrading that entered, or the IQ upgrading of the South African Parliament has been dramatic after these elections. So who knows? We got the wind behind us for a change. Will the ANC survive? The other thing Ramaphosa is really good at is at putting his people in the right places. At the NEC, he controls. You remember, up until, just think of this, just a real basic thing. You are the leader of the Conservative Party in the UK. You go from 57% of the vote to 40% of the vote. What are your chances of surviving? Minus 100. He's gone from 57% of the vote to 40% of the vote, and he's being chaired. No vote of no confidence in the NEC. Why? Because he's got his people there. He's got constitutionalists there, and they know what the alternative is. So, will the ANC survive? Well, they survived up until that point. Will they survive thereafter? I'm not a member of the NEC, but the portents are okay. We must never get carried away in South Africa, because we never know what's going to happen tomorrow. But at least we don't have to get ourselves into a little pity party and slashing of wrists. And we talk to our grandkids or our children and we say, you can't stay in this country. It's a crap place. Shithole country, as Donald Trump calls it. We get a bit of a challenge with Trump that's over in America, not West. But the world is a crazy place. I was in Washington, down in Washington 2 weeks ago. There are at every street, I kid you not, at least one crazy person screaming and shouting. But like crazy homeless person screaming and shouting. And I'll ask my American friend, or a South African friend, who's got a house in Hermanus as well, but he lives in California. So he came down to Washington to spend a bit of time with us. I said to him, what's going on here? He said, well, when Reagan was president, how many years ago that is, he decided he wanted to cut the spending of the mental institutions. So there's no space in mental institutions anymore. So crazy people are now homeless, and Washington is, pretty comfortable place. Like all the artists used to go from Johannesburg to Durban in winter because it was more comfortable, as you would. Same thing in Washington. Another thing that struck me about, you've mentioned capitalists. Yeah, capitalism is not a great system, but as Winston Churchill said, he said it about democracy, but you could have said it about capitalism, the best we've got. That at least people are motivated to do the right thing. But in the US today, you stand in a queue for 10 minutes at one of the Smithsonian's. You get to the front of the queue, you put in your order for 2 cups of coffee, and they ask you for your card, and what comes up on your card, and it's not just the Smithsonian, every single outlet that we went to in Washington, is what tip are you going to leave 15%, 18%, 20%. For the till boy. And there is a little thing underneath, you can say no tip. And boy, if you press no tip, you know what kind of service you're going to get. So that is capitalism gone nuts. Absolutely nuts. So there are little things like that sometimes we've got to just thank ourselves that we are in a country that has got paths, that has got challenges, that we do think of other people because we have to. When the overspanned municipality has their meetings, they couldn't sit there and say, I'll look after the people who voted for me. I don't care about the guys in Swedish. They're actually probably going the other way and saying, if we don't have a society where everybody is happy, we're going to have trouble. So let's address it. America's not like that, eh? You either Kamala or you Trump. Work into the curio shops there in Washington, D.C., which is the only black majority city in the United States, by the way. Because 30% of Americans are black. So Washington is full of government employees and disproportionate number of people are there. You walk into this curio shop, and what caps do you see? MAGA, Trump 24, I love Donald Trump, very few Biden caps. Okay, well, yeah, now I know why. But it's a divided society. You buy those caps to wear to show the other people that you are on this side or that side. Our society is, by comparison, a very different place to live than many other societies in the world. And of course, when you then just start casting your mind across into what's happening in Europe, and you come back and you think, quite far away from where the nukes might start falling, you again realize that there are fairly good reasons for optimism. And it's, geez, guys, I'm honest, we should be getting on our means every night and thanking God for what we have and how we're living in this part of the country, because not only are we privileged to be here, but it is a beacon for how it can be and how it should be and how it may be for the whole nation in future.